What are some things that we might be doing in youth ministry that are unintentionally hindering our growth? That's what we're talking about today on the Ministry Coach Podcast.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the Ministry Coach Podcast, where we give you actionable steps that will help you grow your ministry, not just in size, but also in health. Today, actually, we're talking about things that you can do that will go the other way and might kill that growth in your youth ministry.
Yeah, the things not to do, the biggest hindrances to your growth. And we've identified 5 that we're going to talk about tonight. So, don't do this stuff.
My name is Jeff Lascola. This is
Kristen Lascola.
And if you aren't already subscribing here on YouTube, make sure you do so. If you get value out of this episode, make sure you like and subscribe and hit that notification bell, which will actually remind you when a new episode drops. We usually do one per week. We try our best, very best to do that. If you're listening on our podcast channel, make sure you subscribe there as well. And we would love to hear a review from you guys. But right now, let's jump right into this topic. What is number 1 on things that will destroy your youth ministry growth?
All right. So number 1 is disorganization. So that is a surefire way to hinder your growth. And I think sometimes youth pastors are talented and gifted people, and they just go as fast as they can, and things are going well. But then underneath the surface, structures are breaking down, people are frustrated, there's side conversations going on. So you can only maintain that high octane without organization for so long, because organization takes time, discipline, and it takes pause. And I think a lot of times we don't want to do that. We just want to keep going and blowing up and doing our thing. But to stop and put the necessary organizational structures in place doesn't feel like we're growing, and it doesn't feel like we're getting ahead, and it doesn't feel like action, but it's laying a foundation of sustainability for your growth. So I kind of feel like that's where you need to start. Is I went through a period of really fast growth, and it made me realize, oh, shoot, like I don't have the structures in place to support the growth that I'm enjoying or looking for. And so organization, and here's the thing, students can tell when you're throwing things together at the last minute. And I think the younger age you work with, the more forgivable you think it is. Or like, I mean, I've actually heard people say out loud, I probably have said,
they're just junior hires.
They're just junior hires, like whatever, you know? And so here's why we say that, probably not because we don't value them, but they are very forgiving. So there's things that they'll overlook or roll with the punches, or so the transition didn't go well, so the drummer was offbeat the whole time. You know, like there is a point where they're just like, oh, well, we still love your ministry. We're having a good time. But at the same time, I think I've noticed that if that pattern continues, if it's not just like a one-off, like, whoa, we had an off night, but if that is more the culture of your ministry to kind of be thrown together at the last minute, they really do notice. And I've had seasons where students have called us out on the lack of preparation on the games, or I had some different leaders speaking from time to time, and students were like, you know, these messages aren't up to par, and they were junior high. Yeah. I mean, it was kind of like, shoot, you know, they are paying attention. And so keeping that quality control, and that, I think organization and quality definitely go together when we're thinking ahead, when we're planning ahead. And this is especially important to parents, you know, because do we have systems in place that make parents' lives easier? Can they sign up for your camp easily? Can they access forms easily? Do they know the information, start and stop times? Do they know the cost? Do they know a way to get a hold of you? Do you return phone calls in a timely manner? This is stuff that we've all talked about before, but I think it all falls under that umbrella of organization, and that people come and they know what to expect and like what's expected of them. I think sometimes leaders get frustrated, your volunteers, your small group leaders, when they show up to an event and they didn't know.
Right. That's the worst when you feel like, I don't know what we're doing. I certainly don't know what I'm doing.
Right. And it's hard. There's a lot of, and the bigger you are, the more lines of communication there are. And so are you the person to maintain all those lines? Is it time to hire someone? Is your team and ministry becoming too complex for you to be good at communicating? Then maybe you need an intern, maybe you need a director, maybe you need a associate pastor. I don't know. But if there's too many lines of communication that you can't do it well, you either need to find another type of system or you need more people. So that kind of leads into number 2, which is what will hinder the growth of your youth ministry will be bad communication. So I feel like organization and communication are like related, definitely. And so communication, what it does is it builds trust and it builds buy-in, and both of those things lead to longevity. And that's what we want. We want people to stay around as long as possible, right? So I know people personally who have left ministries completely, like, hey, I'd love to be a leader, and then find out the internal communication of that ministry was so bad that they left 100% due to the communication from the leader to them. Because honestly, poor communication feels a little devaluing, and it feels a little disrespectful of, like, if I'm a key part of your ministry, your organization, or your team, whatever it might be, and you couldn't even give me the time to communicate what was expected, when something was, what we were doing next, and not just the day before,
right,
that communicates a little bit of a devalue, and people kind of get sick of it. On the parent end, what bad communication does is it makes your ministry appear very unstable and very untrustworthy. So if parents are going to trust you with their children for any amount of time, communication has to be like your number one priority. So think of all the different people, and we've done whole episodes on this before, so you can go back and listen to that if you want to get in the nitty-gritty of communication. But that is basically all I'm going to say about this, and then we'll move on, is think of the different categories of people you need to communicate to and how well are you doing it. Your leaders, your parents, your students, and then other staff that are working alongside you at the church. Because here's the sad truth about bad communication. I don't think it matters how good you are at your job, how much you love those kids, how much your heart is in the right place. But if you're bad at communicating, people automatically assume it's a integrity and a character thing. Maybe in some circumstances they'll give you the benefit of the doubt, but I think a lot of times it reflects, I think it's just a reflex for it to reflect on your character and your competency. Like it just leaves a bad taste in people's mouth about like I had a bad experience with that person. I don't know that I want to be aligned with them. And then they'll go and look for something else, especially when it comes to their kids. And so number 3 of the biggest hindrances for growth is irrelevance, or being outdated. Okay. And so I'm not saying at all that you have to be young, because everyone has a different definition of what old or young is. Right. So I'm not talking about an age thing, but we can age ourselves by becoming irrelevant or outdated. And here's what I mean by that is that, oh gosh, you and I talk about this all the time. Sometimes you'll go to a church. So say it's for like a program, or you get invited to like a Christmas thing. Maybe it's a church school combo or something. And you're sitting there waiting, and there's some person in the sound booth that has no clue what they're doing. And the sound doesn't work, and things are staticky, and the mics are going in and out. And you're, it's just like, there's just this thing of like, you guys are like in the 80s trying to use today's technology, but you don't know what you're doing. Like, there's just this feeling of like churches get stuck like in decades past.
And I think a lot of that has to do probably with who's in charge, whether that be obviously a senior pastor or the youth pastor or whatever. But you get to a certain point, whether it be fashion, vernacular, things like that, where it's like you stop growing in that area.
Yeah.
And then it's like, yeah, that you look at that person, you're like, that is 2010.
Okay.
From here on out.
And
like,
so Carey Nieuwhof, he wrote a book called Didn't See It Coming. And one of the chapters is, what is one things leaders don't see coming is that all of a sudden they wake up and they're irrelevant.
Right.
And exactly what you're saying, he says they pick a decade that
they don't pick it picks you, and you
True.
all of a sudden just get stapled to that time in your life, and you become on a shelf in the Hall of Fame of, this is 1997, this is 2000,
right, of like that decade that maybe that's what you loved. Like, I loved this kind of music. This was one of the best times of my life. I loved this style, whatever it might be. And you just kind of stay there. And he says it's like, when you go into old people's homes, they're living in 2021, but at the same time, you're like, why does your house look like it's from the 70s?
Totally.
And it's like, they could update it if they wanted, but it's like, no, this is where they maybe fell in love, or this is the era they got married in, or this is the era they raised their family, or this is just representative of a good time of their life. But to the rest of us, it's like, whoa, you guys are so outdated. But all of us can get like that to a certain extent.
I've been like that. I don't know what my decade or year is, but I'm completely irrelevant. I'm okay with it. But yeah, I think the title of that book is so pertinent. Didn't see it coming, because it's not like you start seeing like, oh, I didn't know what that band was.
Right.
Oh, I didn't realize that were those the kind of genes that are in right now. It's like all of a sudden you wake up and you're like, where am I? I don't know what's happened. And people will be using lingo that you're like, I've never heard that. I don't understand what that is.
That band slaps.
Why are you
that band
why are
slaps.
you wearing these things and I'm clearly not? And
yeah.
And all of a sudden, you don't see it coming, and you're like, I've been left behind. The train is long gone.
Right. And if it's just a matter of personal preference, sometimes like you can't argue with that. It's
Be
like,
who
whatever.
you are.
But here's what he had to say. And I thought this was really this is a great definition. So he's saying irrelevance happens when the language, methods, or styles you use no longer connect to the culture and people around you. Essentially, you end up speaking a language people no longer understand or appreciate. Irrelevant people eventually lose the ability to communicate meaningfully with the people they care about and to contribute to the causes they're passionate about, which is really sad, because that's the goal that every single one of us has, is as pastors, we want to communicate effectively to the people we care about. Mm-hmm. So I think sometimes we can say, oh, well, this is just me. But it's like, okay, yes, it can be you, but you also need to, like Carey goes on to say, be a student of the culture.
Right.
And so you're allowed to like what you like, but when you present ideas or little things like logos or themes or styles or music or, like you said, lingo, they have to line up with today's culture. And so to be a student of culture then actually takes work. Like my friends and I have this whole text going about jeans because I cannot figure them out right now. And I'm like, can you guys please help me figure out jeans? Because I don't want to get left behind the jean train. Like, oh my gosh, I don't understand it. Because I feel like a lot of what the people are wearing now is like, I wore that in 5th grade. Like, is that seriously back? And so to be a student of culture, some ideas for that are, Carey suggests surrounding yourself with young people. So who's the youngest person on your team? And are they at a place and postured by yourself that they have a voice in decision making? And so that's like the whole like key chain leadership. Do they hold keys to something like responsibility? Not just like, oh yeah, they lead a small group, but do young people have a voice and do they help you make decisions? That's so important. And then like Carey says in his book, he's like, I just sometimes hop on Billboard and like, okay, what's a good song right now? Because I don't listen to that kind of music. So I want to know, like, what is everyone listening to?
And with the speed of social media, that stuff, trends go by so much faster than in past decades.
Right.
Where we might camp on a certain style or music genre or whatever for a long time, a longer time. Now, like, weeks go by and things might have completely changed.
Right.
In several different directions.
I know. I think my part is in the wrong place as I'm like, oh, the part's supposed to be in the middle. But sometimes the part has to go on the side, and just depending how my hair is that day. But it's okay. Like, I can make a comeback.
This sounds very superficial, but there is deeper meaning behind it.
There is. I mean, so the book Peace with God by Billy Graham, I was reading that this year and it kind of surprised me. I mean, Billy Graham, he's from back in the day. And in one of his chapters, he encourages Christians, and I love his like old timey.
You've talked about this before.
Yeah, his like old timey way of saying it. But he's like, we should be keeping up with the latest fashions. Right. And I'm like, Billy Graham thought Christians should keep up with the latest fashions? Like, that's interesting.
Well, I've always been, I have a theory that the drug for Christians is fashion. Because if we're not engaging in the alcohol and the drug culture, it's like, what's left? What's like, well, you got to be on top of fashion. That's why when you go to any Christian camp, it's like, you'll see this is the cutting edge of fashion.
Yes. Yeah. So if you want to know what's in style,
college or campus,
you can figure that out. So yeah. And the reason for that is we are missionaries to this culture. And so we have to speak the language, and it's a very simple way. Like, you're not compromising any morals to stay in fashion and on trend. Maybe you're sacrificing a little pride. Like, for me, sometimes it's a pride thing of like, I don't want to wear what you guys are wearing. But then at the same time, it's like, shoot, I stick out. Like, I don't want to stick out as like, whoa, like, who's this like boomer, you know?
Child of the 60s.
I am not a child of the 60s, just to be clear.
But you run the risk of doing one of two things. I'm either going to stick with my guns and be who I am and lose that relevancy to who you're ministering to.
Yeah.
Or you're going to try and very unauthentically immersing yourself in their culture and trying to sound and be like them.
Right.
There's that meme with Steve Buscemi he's carrying the skateboard, and it's like, how do you do, fellow kids? it's not fitting.
No.
And you kind of need to be okay with that.
Right. Well, and it's not that you're trying to be a teenager. It's
right.
just that you, like, for me, how this translates to real ministry in real life is, you know, styling on certain things. Like, what's a great app that makes your pictures look cool, and so does our Instagram look current? You know, stuff like that. Or the style of our room, or the language on our, like, you know, when you post a picture, like the caption, there we go. Duh. See, boomer.
Okay, boomer.
Okay.
I don't think we're even saying okay, boomer anymore.
No, and I still want to say lit. It just rolls off the tongue. I still want to dab, but all those things are gone. So yeah, it's like, yeah. I have another quote from Carey Nieuwhof. He said, "Why should you become a student of culture? Simple. People who don't understand today's culture will never be able to speak into it." There's the motivation right there. Whether you agree with the culture or not, understanding it is a prerequisite to being able to influence it. So we want to be able to influence culture. We have to understand it. It doesn't mean I need to wear crop tops.
Exactly.
And like,
that's what I mean. Because if you go that way, that's when it's very unauthentic. That's
right.
That's
where
not
you're like,
you.
So it's like, okay, how can I take the style? What does it fit for someone my age? How can I be aware of it all so that I can understand what they're saying and engage with them and all of that? Because to be honest, like, I am a better youth pastor than I was when I was 20 years old. So just because I'm not 20 years old anymore, it doesn't mean like, well, no one's going to think you're cool. You better stop. It's like, well, okay, I would rather have the wisdom and knowledge and continue and then learn the cool as I go, or leverage the cool, leverage or learn the cool. That's like a little soundbite. Or leverage it from somebody else on my team. Like, hey, you guys be up in front, you be cool, you be the culture setters, you know, you put that like young flavor in that, and I have the wheel of the ship and I know where we need to go and what we need to do, because honestly, I am so much better now than I was at 20 years old. And I don't want to give that up. So I think there's just a way to do it tastefully without trying to be something you're not. But the point is, like that Carey is saying, is understanding it, not being it, understanding it so that you can influence it. So don't get stuck in a past decade. And I know we want to fight it sometimes, like, oh, this music today sounds like racket. Yes, but what can you put in that is current to let them know, like, hey, we still have a pulse over here.
Right.
Like, yeah. So if you pick up that book, that to me was the best chapter. He talks about a lot of things, and that one I was like, dang, that's really good. Okay. Number 4, what is the biggest hindrance for growth? Number 4, you're not fun or friendly. Those are 2 things that will definitely
accept it. You're not fun. You're not friendly.
You're not friendly. Those are 2 big growth chokers for sure. So this question comes down to, how are you with visitors? Are you a friendly church? Are you a place where students feel like they can invite their friends? And do you assimilate those visitors well? You know, a lot of times people come to church, and like I always tell my students, think of what it was like the very first time you came.
Horrifying.
It is horrifying. And so what did you want somebody to do for you? So here's another piece you can leverage is your student leadership team. I meet with mine once a month, and we talk about how to do biblical Christian leadership. And what do I harp on most of the time is being friendly to visitors. I say, you know what? I'm an adult. They expect me to be friendly. And, you know, it's not impressive to them that an adult's like, hey, what's your name? What school do you go to? It maybe means a little something. But when someone their own age comes up to them and is like, you should sit with us, or do you want to be on our team? Or, hey, I'll buy you something from the snack shack, or, you know, let me introduce you to my friends. I said, guys, it might be a little uncomfortable, but I promise you, you will not die of uncomfortability, and it will not go on forever. So just know that it will be temporary and you can get through it. And this is how we love people. And this is the like evangelism. Like you're doing ministry when you do this, because ministry is people. So if you can just have a conversation. So I gave them a few questions to start them off. What is your name? Hello. Hello. What's your name? You know, I haven't seen you before. What school do you go to? What grade are you in? So glad you're here. Do you want me to introduce you to, I don't know. I said, catch the vibe, see how it's going. And then if it's so awkward and you're both about to die of awkwardness, just say like, hey, well, it was good talking to you. You know, hopefully I'll see you next week, or something like that. But just to be, I said, what do all people want? They want to be seen. So really instruct your student leadership team, see people, see them. And that's a skill that's going to be hard at first, because students are like, I got my friends, I'm good.
Right.
Like, why would I look out for anybody else? They must be good. And I said, guys, I just saw a kid last week standing all by himself. He was brand new. Nobody was talking to him. And I had to be the awkward person to go up and say hi. And he
you
probably
excel at that, though.
I am professionally awkward. So we had a great exchange. It was uncomfortable, but I'm like, hey, at least somebody saw him.
Yeah. So
really use your student leadership team for that. And then, you know, we've talked a lot about this before too, but is it fun? So, you know, youth ministries are meant to be fun. That is the time of the week that it's like design church that a junior higher or high schooler will love. I think, again, we've mentioned, I think sometimes in the name of spiritual depth, we have to get rid of fun because we think like, that's it. But it's like, again, think along the lines of Carey Nieuwhof. If you want to influence the culture, you have to understand it. Fun is a need. Fun is a definite spiritual need. And so are we providing that for walls to come down and people to be open and receptive to the gospel? Is it a fun place to come? Do they want to be there? And then lastly, number 5, this one is just hard to come to grips with, because sometimes it's not your fault. And there's nothing, because all the rest are your fault.
Way to go.
Just kidding. Kind of. But no, we all need to get better at certain things. If you have a sucky location or atmosphere, like, and unless I had experienced it, I would have never believed it. I would have just said, you need to try harder. You know, like people would come to a garage if it was awesome, but it's like, no, it is not true. Your loyal followers and loyal fans will, it's just not going to grow. It'll grow, but not huge. So like, for example, for years, we were renting space at a community center. We had a big classroom, and then like there was some grass outside for us to play games in. We grew, but there was a definite ceiling on that place. We went from 11 to 25, which was okay. That was percentage wise growth, but we're not going to get to 40, 50, whatever. Then we rented space at an industrial building, and then we went from like 40 to like 80. And that was like, okay, sweet. It could have held more, but we kind of had hit our ceiling there. And then we moved to a pretty sweet location, and then
permanent location. And it was just like overnight, we were like 80 to over 150 students. And it's not that I cracked the code on, I finally understand how to do youth ministry. I, for all intents and purposes, did things fairly the same, like just change it up to stick with the times, but it was not a drastically different ministry. So how do you account for that growth? Well, we had a really sweet location that people wanted to be at, and that people who aren't even Christians wanted to come to and hang out and be and like invite their friends and use it as a space for community, because it lends itself to comfort and fun, and it's like almost luxurious in certain aspects. And it's just a place you want to be. It's a place I want to be. Right. Like even on my days off, it's like, I don't mind being here. This is a nice place, And so I think you're at just a disadvantage if you have a really bad or small location, and even at a further disadvantage if you rent space. And I don't say that to say like, well, tough luck, but kind of how we talked about in the Church in a Box episode of just like, hey, don't be too hard on yourself. Do everything you can to maximize that space, to make it awesome, to make it your own and all of that. But at the end of the day, it is still what it is. Right. Like a jail cell, still a jail cell. That's how I felt in that community center. Like there was like, hey, how many colors can you name? Like posters on the wall, like, because it was meant for kids, and there's nothing I could do about that. And it doesn't say like, hey, this is a cool hangout for or
students,
if your budget doesn't allow for drastic changes.
Right.
We did talk about in the last episode ways that you can. This is more for portable church, but it's also applicable for any youth ministry that kind of wants to up their game, making their room look cooler and be more relevant and exciting and a fun place to be. However, that costs money, and not everybody has that readily available. And you do work up and try and get some of that stuff over time and set goals and things like that. But then ultimately it does matter with some of the other things we talked about where, okay, so you're in a jail cell and it's lame, but you've made it as cool as it can possibly be. It's like, are you... when people come into your jail cell, it's a horrible analogy. Are they having the best experience that they can have?
Yeah, and you can still do such good ministry. You can, and it's possible. Like, it's not like, well, if you're renting space, give up now. It's more just, I think you should be graded on a curve, basically, is what I'm saying. Because when I first came in, there was a different youth group, and they had this great permanent facility, and they were all the rage, right? And people were always talking about them. And it was like, I would always grade myself compared to them. Like, well, why aren't we as great as that youth group? Why aren't we as great as this youth group? And it bothered me, and I know as youth pastors, we really do struggle with comparison, and that's not healthy. I understand that. But the natural tendency is to ask yourself the question, why? Like, why can they do it and I can't? What is wrong with me? And I racked my brain, and I visited other youth groups and other youth rooms to try to figure out what's the secret sauce that I'm missing, because I'm doing everything I know how to do. But honestly, I think it came down to our location. It was just a hard sell.
You're saying being a big factor in it, but not the factor, not the only factor. Because you could also have the greatest facilities in the world and everything else. You have horrible communication. You have your volunteers are lame.
It can't stand alone. Your location cannot stand alone, of course, but it is a big factor. And I think I just have a lot of compassion for the youth pastors that are in that spot that they're grading themselves sometimes and comparing to the church down the street that is blowing up, and they can't figure out, like, they question their gifts and abilities every week.
Yeah.
When it might just be you got dealt this location and you're going to have to stick it out and stay strong
and do the best you can.
Do the best you can.
Get that 1% better every single week.
Yeah. And hopefully the day will come, you know, where you're in the promised land. That's how I felt. Like, as cheesy as it is, I really felt like we've been wandering in this desert like forever. And now here we are. So that's just a little encouragement or discouragement, however you want to take it.
I'm depressed.
Well, I feel like I wish somebody could have spoke that into me to tell me, hey, you are really good at your job. You have a really hard location, but hang in there. It's not
But
you.
even with the numbers, and not that numbers are all that matters, because health is more important than size. So that if you're having growth, it better be healthy growth. But even in those like set up, tear down locations, you went from 11 to 20, from 20 to 80.
I'm not saying there's no growth. I'm just saying you will hit your ceiling pretty quick.
But a lot of youth groups, if you were to say even like 50, it's like that's a big youth group.
It is.
And to say, you know, you can get there even if you don't have the shiny, you know, brand new building.
Yes, you can grow and you can do really good, really healthy ministry, but it will hinder your growth. It will. Just like combining junior high and high school will hinder your growth. And I didn't put that on the list, but it's a parenthesis number 6 because I'm a big, I just don't think it's sustainable for the long run. I think, again, you'll have the buy-in of those fans and those loyal people and those families that just love you and love what you're doing. But reaching the community, the outside, those who aren't bought in, that's the big challenge there. So in closing, to make it a little personal, are you growing? Because we can do all of this stuff, like make sure we're really good at our job. And a lot of what we talked about is very professional, through a professional lens. Be good at communicating, be very organized. Yeah, because this is our job. It is a job and it is a calling and all of that. But then it's a job with a very spiritual proponent to it. So you're going to have to keep growing yourself if you want your youth ministry to grow. So are you passionate, and have you put yourself in a place where God is still teaching you things? Because we know that our ministries will reflect us, and you are the most important person in your ministry because everything else will trickle down from that. How spiritually healthy you are, how close to God you are, how much you've grown. And we all have gone through seasons where we just feel like God's teaching us so much, and other seasons where we're like, I haven't read my Bible on my own in quite a while. And there is a difference in the way that you speak and interact with people, for sure. Like, you can't get spiritually lazy or spiritually slack, because that is, your spirituality reflects the spirituality of your ministry overall.
Totally.
So that's kind of the closing thought.
Well, let's do a question of the day to wrap things up.
Okay.
And then we'll do a comment of the day.
Well, it's not called a comment of the day.
I don't know what it's called. Community comment.
Reviews. I don't know, but they're my
Something like
favorite.
They are fun.
You want to know
why?
Because words of affirmation is
My love language. So the question of the day, if I can remember what it was. Oh, yeah. It makes me laugh. When you were a kid, when you were younger, was there anything that you ate strangely? Not something that you ate that was strange, because we did ask that question before.
Sticks of butter.
This is, what did you eat strangely? What was the method?
What was yours?
I kind of, as an adult, I still sometimes do this, but I don't really eat string cheese anymore. But I used to.
You know what? I knew it was going to be string cheese.
Okay.
Because I've seen people eat it weirdly.
I would peel it.
Yeah.
I used to peel it, and then I would kind of like whip it into my mouth. And then as I got older, I kind of would just like not even tear it apart. I would just bite right through it. But
I don't like when people, it's like such a large chunk to bite through. I think you have to peel it.
it was fun. But yeah, I would just whip it. So
A lot of people call them cheese sticks,
Not a fan.
string cheese.
string cheese.
Yeah, me too. Okay, this is it's going to be hard for me to describe, but I'll try my best. So spaghetti.
Okay.
I used to eat it not cooked. So
Like the hard noodles?
So I would like just bite the hard noodles until they were like teeny tiny. And then when I got enough of them, I would like
store it in your cheeks or something?
Not necessarily. I would suck them all together in my mouth. Like if you push them against the inside of your teeth, like, and so they form a clump, and then I would take it out of my mouth.
And then cook it?
No. And then I would just set it like on the counter. And then I'd wait for it to dry. And then I'd eat it.
We have derailed.
And then I would eat it. And I like so it was kind of like half cooked pasta because
but it was kind of like somewhat boiled in your mouth.
Exactly.
Oh,
but it was still crunchy, but it was small, and so they were like these little like balls of half cooked pasta.
Chewed up pasta.
They were great. I liked them.
But not like you didn't put any sauce on it or anything?
No, I would just wait.
Oh, that's weird. Yeah.
No, you wait till they harden and dry.
Would you then redo the cycle and do it again? Do it into a different shape or something? Or was that when you would finally eat it?
I'd like to move on now. I'd like to move on.
Let's go with the review of the day. This is horrible.
I just got really vulnerable.
Yeah, I learned something about you that I wish I didn't know, I think. Okay, this is from our podcast, and this is from OKFVINVRJBJ, which...
It sounds like one of those things like, are you a robot? Write these letters.
The irony of it is, I really wanted OKFVINVRJBG to be my
This isn't a real person.
name.
It's a robot.
Or this is back when you would choose an email address, like, what about Jeff Lascola? And they're like, that's not available, but you can have Jeff Lascola, AB23475. Yeah, that's what I want. No, anyways, maybe there's a real reason why. And if you are OKFVI,
they know who they are.
Can you explain it? Because I'm actually intrigued. There's probably a lot. I'm going to say the OK is Oklahoma and everything else.
Just read it.
It says, such a great podcast and resource for youth ministry. Check it out. Thank you.
All that.
Well, hey, that's a good review. I like it.
Thank you. Okay. I'm just going to call him.
VFG. Yeah, that's a lot of letters, but maybe you didn't realize I didn't know what mine was for the longest time.
Yours was what?
Like when you have to sign up for iTunes, like you have like a name, and I saw a review I had left a long time ago. I'm like, I never knew that was what mine was. So maybe they don't know either.
Maybe they don't know.
We appreciate your review. And if you guys, anybody else want to leave reviews, go ahead and we might read it here on the air. Like this is live. Hey, we might be doing some YouTube lives coming up. If that's something you'd be interested in us doing, it'd be kind of a cool way to interact.
I think it'd be fun to answer questions like on the fly like that. Yeah. Interaction.
Well, we thank you. We appreciate you in the community that have left reviews and left comments on our YouTube channel. Make sure you write anything in the comments on our YouTube channel that you ate strangely. Not something strange that you ate.
Get it.
But that how you ate it strangely.
Beat the spaghetti clump.
Guy. And with that note, I'm going to go throw up. Thank you guys so much for watching and listening, and we'll see you next time.